Good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Story. Breaking tonight, indictments for Manafort and Gates related not to the Trump campaign, but to their years as lobbyists for Ukraine. At the same time, another partner in those deals, Tony Podesta, Democrat operative and brother of Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, shocked a lot of people today by stepping aside after his connections to Manafort were revealed. So what is to come there? Where is this story going? Is it winding down or is it revving up? And what about the Clinton campaign's involvement? Today, Paul Manafort's attorney was defiant after the court appearance.
Well, I think you all saw today that President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. You see an indictment brought by an Office of Special Counsel that is using a very novel theory to prosecute Mr. Manafort regarding a FARA filing. The United States government has only used that offense 6 times since 1966 and only resulted in 1 conviction. The second thing about this indictment that I myself find most ridiculous is a claim that maintaining offshore accounts to bring all your funds into the United States as a scheme to conceal from the United States government is ridiculous.
And the White House pushing back hard. The president tweeted this: "Sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus? Also, there is no collusion," he wrote, exclamation point in caps. But we also learned more about the charges against one-time campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. He pled guilty to lying to the investigators when they came to talk to him about all of this during his time, about his time with the campaign. The White House on that had this to say.
Sarah, can you just explain what George Papadopoulos' role with the campaign was?
It was extremely limited. It was a volunteer position. And again, no activity was ever done in an official capacity on behalf of the campaign in that regard.
Big lineup tonight to break all this down for you. David Bossie, former Trump deputy campaign manager, has the inside story for us in a moment, and law professor Alan Dershowitz with the legal fallout. But we take you first to the White House, where Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is standing by with the very latest on this story tonight, which is keeps popping. Hi, Ed.
Still developing, Martha. Good to see you. I'm told the president's legal team met here with him early today to make sense out of all of this, the indictments and the guilty plea, and they came away from that believing this has nothing to do with the president and that they're confident special counsel Robert Mueller's probe will not lead to the Oval Office. However, these are deadly serious charges, criminal charges involving the president's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, and his business associate, Rick Gates, both pleading not guilty to the 2 men facing up to 20 years in prison in a 12-count indictment charging conspiracy to launder money dating back to around 2006, allegedly funneling $75 million through shell companies while working for a pro-Russian political party in the Ukraine, years before the 2016 election. So in terms of actual collusion in that election, legal expert Andrew McCarthy writes in National Review, quote, "The Paul Manafort indictment is much ado about nothing, except as a vehicle to squeeze Manafort, which is special counsel Robert Mueller's objective." And one of the president's top lawyers, Ty Cobb, says the White House is not worried at all about Mueller squeezing either Manafort or, potentially down the road, former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn. Cobb suggesting they can't flip on the president because they have nothing, telling a podcast for the New York Times, quote, "The president has no concerns in terms of any impact as to what happens to them on his campaign or on the White House." And as you noted, it turns out today's indictment also implicates Democratic lobbyist Tony Podesta, brother of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta. In the indictment, Tony Podesta's company, the Podesta Group, is listed as Company B, which worked with Manafort and Gates to lobby on behalf of that pro-Russian Ukrainian political party. Tony Podesta today revealing he'll step down from his firm. Perhaps more worrisome for the White House tonight, there was a surprise that ex-Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about a conversation he had in 2016 with a professor close to the Russian government who claimed he had dirt on Hillary Clinton, though Sarah Sanders tried to downplay his role.
You say George Papadopoulos had no official capacity. What do you mean by that?
I mean, he was a volunteer on the campaign and a volunteer member of an advisory council that met one time.
Except Papadopoulos was photographed with then-candidate Trump, who had touted him as an advisor and a fine man during an editorial board meeting at the Washington Post. Today's plea says the advisor had several interactions with Russians and has been cooperating with the special counsel since July. But the bottom line tonight is there is still no evidence from everything that happened today that there was any collusion in the last election, though the big mystery tonight is why Papadopoulos lied to the FBI if he had nothing to hide, Martha.
Yeah, great question. Ed, thank you very much. David Bossie, former Trump deputy campaign manager, is also a Fox News contributor. David, good evening to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, as always. I guess to jump forward for a moment, the Papadopoulos issue, you were on the campaign when he was there. Did you know him?
First, no, he was not there when I was there. I came on at the end of the campaign, Martha. As you remember, Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway came on in mid-August, and I came on just after. So,
all right. So you weren't there until September, and he was there in March.
Never heard of him.
So did you ever interact with him at all? Never heard of him.
Never heard of him.
Okay. The concern that he may have been wearing a wire, that he may have still been involved in talking to people at the campaign. What do you think about that?
I think that's far-fetched. Look, no one knows, but, the campaign ended, almost a year ago now. So I think that the potential of him wearing a wire at the campaign, I don't see where this investigation would have been at any stage to have done that, first. And secondly, I wish he was, because there was no collusion. So I think that would be a nice thing to be able to prove to people.
In terms of some of the other reports that are out there tonight, one says that the White House is more concerned about Rick Gates because he maintained his relationships longer than Paul Manafort did with people at the White House, and also that they were relieved that it was not Michael Flynn today. But of course, that could still come.
Well, anything is possible, Martha, but obviously Rick Gates and Paul Manafort ran the campaign for about 8 weeks. They were in charge, and they were there a little bit before Paul Manafort actually took over, but they were there for about 8 weeks in charge, and I can just submit to you that when I got there at the end of August, there was nothing to do, no discussion whatsoever about Russia collusion, anything like that. It just is far-fetched, and I understand why the president is frustrated because he can only say there was no collusion so many times, and then you look at the Uranium One deal, you look at what's going on with the DNC and others paying for this mysterious dossier now. There's a lot of questions about that in actual fact, and there's none as it comes to out of this two indictments and this guilty plea. Nothing to do with the campaign or collusion.
Yeah, we're going to dig into that a bit more in a moment. Just a question for you, because a lot of people said today that this was not a big surprise. When you looked at the indictments and you looked at the conspiracy charges that were laid out in this indictment, that a lot of people knew that Paul Manafort had a lot of business relationships that they thought were questionable. So when you were observing all of this, and you were, sort of in the larger circle throughout it before you came on, did you think it was a mistake to hire him in the first place?
I did. To be honest with you, Martha, I don't know Paul Manafort well at all. But I know that I personally didn't think he was the delegate hunter, the right mix, the right makeup for the campaign. He hadn't been involved. I thought of that not because of his business dealings, just because he hadn't been involved in a campaign really since the advent of the fax machine. Yeah. So I was kind of somebody who was surprised that he would be in charge.
There's one quote from him saying to one of his Russian clients, an oligarch, Deripaska, since I'm now associated with the campaign, maybe we can help me get whole on this. What do you think about that? Do you think he was using his relationship with the campaign to continue to get money out of his relationships in Ukraine?
Yeah, again, that's what it sounds like, Martha. It sounds like people who have a little tiny bit of access in one case. But in Paul Manafort, he was obviously, the campaign manager. And he is somebody who obviously was trying to had other business dealings that he was trying to move forward, obviously.
And that's one of the reasons he was no longer with the campaign after about 8 weeks when all that started coming out. David, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
So our next guest says special counsel in this case can be, quote, dangerous. Here to explain that and more of what he thinks about today's developments, Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law professor emeritus and author of the new book, Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. Alan, always good to see you. Good to have you here. You said today you think that Manafort is domino number one. What do you mean?
Well, there's no question that although Manafort didn't do anything that had anything to do with the Russian probe or anything like that, his indictment has everything to do with Trump. They never would have indicted him for money laundering or tax evasion if he weren't somebody who they thought could turn on Trump, could provide information and evidence, if not Trump, somebody higher up in the chain between Manafort and Trump. This is dominoes. You knock down the first domino, that knocks down the second domino. Ultimately, what Mueller is aiming for is the big domino in the Oval Office. I don't think they're going to get him. I don't think they have anything because collusion, even if it were to be established, isn't a crime. You have to find something that actually violates a federal criminal statute. I don't think they're even close to that.
You say that Kushner could be one of the dominoes to fall here?
Look, anybody who is close to Donald Trump at this point,
but based on what,
is a target. They're going to, in Kushner's case, they're going to maybe allege that he failed to disclose something on his form. Nobody's ever prosecuted for that. But if they could find anybody for jaywalking, that's what Mueller would do. The goal is to get somebody and squeeze and squeeze.
Well,
the problem.
And that goes back to what you said initially, which, you know, having a special counsel is dangerous, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican,
That's right.
Because they're hired, they're spent a lot of money on, and they tend to sort of begin the process and keep pulling on the strings if they don't appear to be getting anywhere. You know, one of the points that's often brought up is that Bill Clinton didn't meet Monica Lewinsky till 18 months after the special prosecutor began the investigation. So this could go on and on.
This could go on, and there are no limits to what an independent special counsel can do. And this shows that because all they're trying to do, this is what they do with the mafia. This is what they do with terrorist cases, with corporate crime cases. They find the low-hanging fruit. They find a guy who they can go after because his tax returns aren't perfect or something else, or he didn't file a form. Then they threaten him. If a civilian did that, it would be called extortion, but a prosecutor is allowed to extort, essentially. The problem is they want him to sing, but some of these people also want to compose because they want to come out with even better evidence, because the better the evidence, the sweeter the deal they're going to get. So any criminal lawyer will tell you that we've seen a lot of witnesses who were cooperating witnesses who made up stories. And that's why maybe they try to get a wire on some of these witnesses, because you can't make up a wire, but you can make up what you remember, what you saw. You can exaggerate it. You know, as a civil libertarian, I've been opposed to this for years. I'm opposed to it whether the Republicans are doing it against Hillary Clinton or whether the Democrats are doing it against Donald Trump. I really think that criminalizing our criminal justice system, having the first recourse, lock her up, lock them up, endangers all of our rights and endangers democracy. And I hope we can pull back and stop doing that. If you don't like what Donald Trump did, don't vote for him. If you don't like what Hillary Clinton did, you know, put her in the wastebasket of history if that's what you think. But using criminal charges is a very dangerous thing.
Alan Dershowitz, always good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So coming up next, what does this mean for special counsel Robert Mueller?
The president said last week, I believe it was last week, and I've said several times before, there's no intention or plan to make any changes in regards to special counsel.
So mixed reactions tonight on what the former FBI director's role should be, given the growth into even the Democratic Party in this investigation and the fact that he was overseeing the FBI at the time. House Intelligence Committee member Pete King joins me in a moment on that. And new reports raising some serious questions about the Democrats' involvement in the anti-Trump dossier, and possibly a link to former President Barack Obama as well. We'll show you what that is. Plus, the Virginia governor's race turning so ugly as a new Democratic ad portrays Republicans as Confederates hunting down minority children. We will show you this thing when we come back. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee weighs in on that with his take. We're going to hear what he thinks of it when we come back. More on the story.